Hello and welcome back, this is ProTailDev, back with another university project. This time we're looking at user interface, which is one of the modules I did. This assignment was really about prototyping. Now, as I've mentioned in the other project, there was a lot more to this project as well. There was a report that we had to do, there was a bunch of testing, there was also some tests that we had to do, which were much more based on like cameras and lighting and tracking, motion tracking and things like that. I'm not going to go into that with it because this assignment is solely for paper prototyping, which is pretty much the other section of user interface. So before I drag on, I want to quickly mention that there is actually not a whole lot of footage on this, simply because I don't have access to my account on Axio, which is what the prototype was made on. I also don't have access, because of that I don't have access to the other prototypes that I made. I do have the very basic, like quickly written designs, but I'm actually missing, I couldn't find the secondary designs that I made, which were more polished versions. So it's the designs that you'll see on screen soon will be the very rough versions that I did. So yeah, there isn't just not a whole lot of footage, so the chances are this video isn't going to be very long. With that information, let's get straight into it. So the objective of this development was to make an ultimate prototype app. We chose from a list of different apps that we could do. They were very basic apps. They weren't meant to be functional based because this is only a paper prototype. So maybe you would show a investor maybe what it would basically look like to try and convince them, to pitch your idea. And it was also to maybe test what people think. So the app that I chose was Hangman, really simple, straightforward. By the end of the development, there should be a low-level prototype of a Hangman app that is created with extremely basic functionality using the program Axio. Hopefully I'm saying that right. There's a few steps I had to go through to get to that stage though. I had to first research, understand and evaluate 5 different apps that are already on the market. After that, I then created a prototype, like I said, with Axio, which is a really simple software that allows you to create quick designs effectively without much functionality, just as a demonstration to maybe show people what it might look like. So first of all, the first thing I did was I need to evaluate a bunch of apps. So hopefully you've seen them on screen now. So it's 5 different apps that are already on the marketplace. Hopefully they still are, so you can check them out if you want. I actually really thought they were really cool. To evaluate these, I used SUS scores. So the SUS scores is what we had to use for these to try and determine their basic interface and kind of evaluate how they treat their relationship with the app to the user. So SUS isn't really, so even though the scores appear quite high, this is only because SUS scores questions only focus on really basic functionality and the relationship between, like I said, user and app. SUS scores don't really reflect everything about the app. For example, they don't really show creative design or unique concepts. It's more about how the user interact with it, and how well they can navigate it, how well they can use it. If it's simple enough to be able to use. It's not really about the functionality, in-depth functionality, or really about the design. So after I did some calculations using SUS scores and determined that they were actually quite high, this is again because of how SUS scores evaluate that section. But once I figured out what it was, I then had to look at the theme and look at the negatives and positives of it, so a qualitative reflection for all the 5 apps. This is the good and the bad. Things like loading, apps being in every game, the loading screen causes frustration, simple and easy navigation, the placement of things like apps and different buttons being in the correct place so that the user can adapt very quickly. This is a positive if it's done right, negative if it isn't. Make sure the icons are correct. Any kind of faults that you'd immediately detect that make it difficult for the user to interact. If the interaction with the buttons are responsive, if there's ways to adjust the game and allow the player to control different elements of the game. essentially allowing the player to control more while still being easy to do. These are all really interesting things that needed to be evaluated. And so what I did was, for each one, I'd come up with quite a few, maybe 6. No, I think maybe it was a little bit more than that. It was maybe 7 or 8 reasons for each one that are really the most key ones for negative and positive. So after doing a qualitative reflection on all 5 apps and looking for the goods and the bads, I then did Heuristic Evaluation. So that last one was really looking at functionality, and it was looking at how it plays out, the different unique things that really add to the game, and kind of make sure that things were responsive. It was really focused on gameplay, or more specifically functionality. This one is more about the design and unique concepts for design, unique interactions. This is really what the player sees visually. Using the heuristic model for evaluations, I tried to then look for different observations. Like I said, 6 different observations for each app. Hopefully you can see some images again of the different apps, like what they visually look like. Like I said, some of them are quite interesting, some of them look kind of simple, but simple is sometimes better. And straightforward. Again, you just want a lot of the time you just want the actual game of Hangman. You don't want it to be overcomplicated with things you don't need. But hopefully you can see it on screen, some of the observation, some of the designs of the apps. Once I'd done all that, it was time to do my prototype. For the prototype, I first of all created some very basic diagrams of how the functionality would work, how this app navigates from one page to another, kind of where they go, and then after that I threw in a few designs to make it. You've probably seen the very basic versions on screen now. Unfortunately about them, like I said, they're the very, very first designs I did. I then did a more polished version which was much more specific and more detailed. I unfortunately can't find it. So while those designs were going on, I also created a list of different functionality that I would want for the game, based on the ideas of the previous games we saw and kind of the reviews of what players wanted and things like that. I'm not going to go into too much detail about all of these options, and because in the report I gave a very detailed reason for why these specific features are needed. But after showing my designs, all my different designs, and then the diagrams of how they interact and how you navigate, it was time to actually make it. So after that I started doing a test plan. And a test plan was really meant for designing a plan ready to be given to a user, so that they can basically navigate and then get feedback if they ever encounter any problems with the initial design themselves. So something they didn't like about the navigation, where buttons are, this is the perfect time to try and figure out what the user thinks of your navigation. And so you create a plan asking them to basically do things. The more simplistic the command is that you want to give to a user during these test plan, the better it'll be, because they need to figure it out for themselves essentially. And so an example of that might be to try and navigate from the main menu to all the other different pages, and then maybe give a number of maybe all 6 pages. Another one is maybe testing the responsiveness of adapted views for the changing of windows, and see if you can do that. After you have a test plan, you move on to the low level prototype. So the final thing that I ended up doing was I actually created 3 different prototypes, low level prototypes based on those designs, which I actually liked them all. I also created my own logo, hopefully you can see that, but what you're seeing on screen now is the final prototype. The other 2, unfortunately, I can't retrieve them due to not having a student license anymore, and your apps are tied to your license. I do have them, but I just can't access them. So this one, what you're seeing right now, is footage that I recorded while my app was still on my phone. Unfortunately, again, it's no longer on my phone anymore, the app. So the footage you're seeing is from the highlight video footage, some of the footage I used. Basically, it's just me interacting with the game, and it's only a paper prototype. It's only a paper prototype. It actually has no real functionality in it. It's just designed and just to show a user what it might look like. So what you're seeing is the final design. So yeah, all I'm doing is interacting with. I have a profile. I have different start buttons. You have 2 players, a leaderboard. We have rewards, settings. The idea was that you would have different scenarios, and with each, instead of just a hangman, I decided to go for more of hangman rescue, which was you would slowly get lowered into danger. So each time you got it wrong, you get slowly lowered into danger and get closer to death. So crocodiles, snakes, snake pit. And then if you succeed, you'll get raised up by the helicopter and survive. The idea also was that you would be able to take hints and things. So hopefully you can see that in the video. So yeah, that's my prototype app that I worked on in my 3rd year. Like I said, this module was really also about exams, but this is the assignment that I did. Yeah, next time what we'll be looking at is probably the group project or the animation that I worked on, which was using joints and creating my own rig. Anyway, that'll do it, so see you next time.